Okay. Just wanted to, hey, we're still going through the pandemic, so I'm still using some time to do a couple of videos just for fun. And you see a lot of times the battery distribution fuse box on the Audis and the Volkswagens going bad, right? You see those pictures of burnt fuses and everything else. Well, I'd like to just give you a couple of tips today on why that might happen and what you can do to maybe prevent that. The replacements are really cheap, so you can replace the whole thing once it burns up, and they're just fuses. So I would even think the eBay units are pretty good. So let's take a look at what we've got. You guys remember this is the fuse distribution panel right on top of the battery. This is in an Audi TT 2003, but they're all pretty much the same. You can see you've got your main positive terminal coming to this unit, and if you open up the unit, you can see all the fuses inside here. So this is a main distribution fuse box. Now you've got a lot of different items in here. You've got a fuse for cooling. You've got a fuse, I think this is for the alternator. Some of these are for secondary air injection pumps. Some ABS brakes, an ABS pump, I think. I'll put up a video, or not a video, but a picture of some of these, what these fuses actually go to. But a couple of things to try to prevent this is just take a 10 millimeter socket. You remember 10 millimeter? Do you still have one of those? I guess everybody seems to lose, but you want to make sure all these connections are tight. Now you can disconnect the battery to do this if you want. These are all full battery positive, so they're connected directly to the battery. So you don't want to touch a terminal and touch the chassis because you would short it out. But what you want to do is just go along and make sure every one of these is good and tight. They do have a tendency to come loose. Some of these bigger connections, they come loose. You want to make sure they are all good and tight, because if you have a loose connection, what's going to happen is a loose connection in any electronic circuit like that is going to create resistance. And resistance is going to create what we call voltage drop. Anytime you have a voltage drop, you create heat. And if it's bad enough, that heat is going to start to burn out your connections, melt that fuse box. So you want to make sure that all those connections are tight and no corrosion. So one other thing you can do here also, I've had the green fuses sort of lose connection also. So take a look here. What you can do also is pull these fuses out one by one. Make sure everything looks good down in there. Everything is nice and clean. And then put it back in. And do that a couple of times. And what that does is it actually burnishes the little contacts on that fuse and the connections itself. So pull it out, put it back in. Do that a couple of times real carefully, and it'll actually burnish those contacts, and it'll clean those contacts up and keep them from corroding, keep them nice and clean. So now the other thing you can do is you can use a battery terminal protection spray. I have an old can of it here, and what you can do is just sort of coat those. Right, spray those terminals and keep them coated a little bit, and that'll keep them from corroding. Also, you don't want to spray, of course, your terminals for your fuses. You want to keep those nice and clean though by burnishing them. So that should help a lot. If you have issues with that, again, burns usually come from a loose connection or a corroded connection. You know, one where once a connection becomes loose, again, you get air in there, you can get corrosion in there, then you create more and more resistance. more and more resistance, creates more and more voltage drop, more and more heat, and it just burns it up. If you basically have a defective component on one of those lines, that shouldn't burn up your fuse holder. It should open up the fuse itself. So if you're having a problem with burning up the holder itself, or melting the container, or melting that distribution box, it's from loose connections. All right, typically not. The fuse is going to protect from faulty items like your alternator, your fans, so on and so forth. All right, thanks a lot for watching. Later.